Many people who use Twitter have seen the platform become increasingly unworkable since Elon Musk took it over last year. The site's functionality has massively decreased, making it, in many ways, less useful and less fun too. And it's well known that Musk reinstated banned Twitter accounts of far-right groups, professional misogynists, and serial bullies, all in the name of free speech. That's a story the BBC is only just catching up on. They published an article by their disinformation and social media correspondent, Mariana Spring, with this headline: Twitter insiders, we can't protect users from trolling under Musk. It wasn't long before the man himself responded, posting, quite predictably, on Twitter. Sorry for turning Twitter from a nurturing paradise into a place that has ... trolls. Musk followed up with this, parentheses, brackets, real article from organisation calling itself BBC. I guess Musk's point is that Twitter has always had trolls, and that's reasonably fair. But it's not completely clear that Musk actually read the article he's commenting on. It's a precursor to a Panorama documentary about Twitter under his ownership. And while it does focus on the rise of abusive comments on the platform following Musk's sacking of thousands of employees, it also uncovers some more sinister gaps in Twitter's security, ones that have very real offline effects. Spring spoke to Ray Serrato, who left Twitter shortly after Musk's takeover. He was part of a 24-person team trying to tackle state-sponsored attempts to influence elections and undermine democracy. That's a notion Musk seemed to care a lot about when he ran this poll about free speech and Twitter last year, even suggesting that an unregulated Twitter was essential to democracy. But perhaps not anymore. This is Mariana Springs talking to Serrato about the work he did at Twitter.
How frequently were you identifying these kinds of suspicious activities?
Daily. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that that team did that work daily.
Does that team still exist at Twitter?
It exists in a minimized capacity. There are a number of key experts that are no longer in that team that would have covered special regions or threat actors from Russia to China. Influence operations are not going to stop. In fact, one can reasonably suspect that they will increase, given that it's public knowledge that the team has been decimated.
Another issue that has dogged Twitter for years is the prevalence of images depicting child sexual exploitation, as well as the presence of paedophiles who use the platform to groom children. Panorama spoke to a former Twitter employee who worked to put an end to it.
This former employee, who we're calling Rory, used to work in a team tasked with preventing child sexual exploitation and reporting offenders to the police.
We're talking of actual contact abuse or, people sharing the worst of the worst material.
How prevalent was that kind of material on Twitter? How much of a problem was it?
Oh, it was phenomenally prevalent. Every day you would be able to identify that sort of material.
Elon Musk has said he's committed to tackling this kind of content. Removing child exploitation is priority number 1. Please reply in comments if you see anything that Twitter needs to address. But after the takeover, Rory says his team was drastically cut.
You can't go from a team of 20 to a team of about 6 or 7 and be able to keep on top of the child sexual exploitation problem on the platform.
Did Musk ever speak directly to you and your team?
No.
Did you receive any communications from him?
No.
From the management?
No.
Why do you think that is?
Who knows? But you can't take over a company and suddenly believe you have the knowledge of being able to deal with child sexual exploitation without having the experts in place.
Twitter says it removed 400,000 accounts in 1 month alone to help make Twitter safer. But Rory's worried that some users are no longer being reported to the police.
You can, by all means, suspend hundreds of thousands of accounts in a month. Most of the users who had their accounts suspended would just set up a new account anyway. So it wasn't unusual to see people saying, this is my 5th, 6th, 7th plus account. They will be aware of what's going on, so they'll be having a field day.
Last month, the New York Times ran a story with this headline: Musk pledged to cleanse Twitter of child abuse content. It's been rough going. Child sexual abuse imagery spreads on Twitter even after the company is notified. One video drew 120,000 views. Sewer rats, as one regulator described bad actors, remain. The Twitter claims to have made huge progress in eliminating this material from the platform, a claim the New York Times decided to test out. It reports this. To assess the company's claims of progress, the Times created an individual Twitter account and wrote an automated computer program that could scour the platform for content without displaying the actual images, which are illegal to view. The material wasn't difficult to find. In fact, Twitter helped promote it through its recommendation algorithm, a feature that suggests accounts to follow based on user activity. That is crazy. Among the recommendations was an account that featured a profile picture of a shirtless boy. The child in the photo is a known victim of sexual abuse, according to the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, which helped identify exploitative material on the platform for the Times by matching it against a database of previously identified imagery. That same user followed other suspicious accounts, including one that had liked a video of boys sexually assaulting another boy. By January 19th, the video, which had been on Twitter for more than a month, had gotten more than 122,000 views, nearly 300 retweets, and more than 2,600 likes. Twitter later removed the video after the Canadian Centre flagged it for the company. One account in late December offered a discounted Christmas pack of photos and videos. That user tweeted a partly obscured image of a child who'd been abused from about age 8 through adolescence. Twitter took down the post 5 days later, but only after the Canadian Centre sent the company repeated notices. Michael, do the likes of the BBC and New York Times give Twitter a fair crack of the whip? After all, these are commercial rivals to an extent. And I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of BBC Panorama after its performance in recent years, but these are very, very serious claims, aren't they?
We've criticised a previous Panorama episode for taking many claims at face value and not really sort of assessing what people's ulterior motives might be for what they say and why they're trying to get across a particular sort of image of the events which have taken place, which I'll stop beating around the bush. We're talking about the Is Labour Anti-Semitic documentary where, I mean, at least I felt watching it that there wasn't enough corroboration of what people were saying and there wasn't enough investigation into why people might be saying the things that they were saying that were not purely that they'd witnessed this, but rather that they had some political intentions or some political prejudices, let's say. Now, on this documentary, I'm not sure. I think we have enough objective evidence in front of us that we don't need to have to rely on anyone's testimony when it comes to the fact that Elon Musk is an idiot and he is terribly, terribly placed to run Twitter. How often the Elon Musks of the world and all of the people in his coterie have been going on and on and on about paedophilia and child abuse. And every time they mention it is because they're concerned about drag queens reading books to children or whatever, right? So we really care about child sexual abuse. Then what do? They go massively cut the team, which takes down actual videos of child sexual abuse from Twitter, right? So it seems to me that that's brought up purely as a cultural narrative to try and, basically bash on a minority group that, they don't like, essentially. They're not fans of transgender people, so they'll constantly bring up child abuse, even when it's incredibly tenuous. And when the thing that they could actually do to prevent child abuse, which is to have some regulation on their platform, is something they're very unwilling to do. I mean, what to say about Elon Musk is very interesting. I mean, I have been, people have seen on this show before, I've been someone who says, I do think that clearly he was a man of certain talents. SpaceX is an impressive company. Tesla, impressive company. People say, yes, he was born with a silver spoon, but there are lots of people who are born with a silver spoon who don't build a company like SpaceX or a company like Tesla. I think what's become apparent at this point, though, is that there couldn't really be a worse placed person to take over a social media company, because this is a guy who doesn't really have social skills. Like he's not someone who has a good understanding of what makes a social media platform pleasant to use for anyone but a small minority of his sort of far-right edgelords who want it to be a bit of a hellscape, right? So I can't think of any sort of, I know, so the optimists about Elon Musk were sort of saying, I think the big problem that Twitter has isn't necessarily about regulation. It's regulation and sort of censorship that we talk about all the time. The real problem is engineering. I haven't noticed any engineering improvements the guy has made, right? If anything, Twitter has got harder to use, not just sort of on a political or is it nice, are they more troll sense, but just it's more difficult to use. It breaks all the time. And I suppose you can see why this would happen. You come from a company like SpaceX and Tesla, where you're literally, I mean, with SpaceX, you're literally sending rockets into space. And you look at this social media app and you think, how difficult can this be? Obviously, I understand everything and I can understand everything just by reading a few blogs and then I'll get Twitter. Turned out it wasn't that simple. And now the whole thing is crumbling around him. Are BBC and NYT being a bit harsh on him? I mean, he very publicly has this sort of notion, this concept that society is divided between sort of the meritocratic doers and then this sort of liberal, mediocre blob. And I think he very much thinks that the liberal, mediocre blob is made of sort of like the NYT and the BBC. And then the sort of very talented doers are, Elon Musk, obviously, I think he's the king of that. And then, I mean, apparently certain sort of right-wing YouTubers on Twitter who he seems big fans of. But I mean, I think it's a naff ideology. I think if there was any truth as to sort of like the liberal groupthink that you get in certain institutions, the idea that that's sort of shaping the world and what it's doing is holding down these incredibly sort of adventurous, intelligent, usually always men, from achieving because people are jealous of them. That's kind of his worldview. And he seems to have brought that to this social media company. And the result is just this sort of embarrassing chaos explosion. I mean, I hope I'm being fair to all parties here.
Yeah, what you said about the double standard is really, really crucial. So you've got people like Elon Musk who say, we can't have children being told stories, nursery stories, children's stories by somebody who's dressed up in drag. It's not safe. But I've had an experience many times on Twitter. I'll search a word like a trending football hashtag or a footballer's name if there's a game on, because it's interesting. Porn comes up, like naked images of men and women come up. Or he talks about removing the trolls. I've never had more fake accounts DMing me of like naked women and like quite, adult content. Protect the kids from that, Elon. You can actually have control over that. If a child, an 8 or 9-year-old child, word searches something on Twitter and then they're confronted with people having sex, you can do something about that. Just a thought. But like you say, Michael, there's not really any points in the culture war.